Hey guys, welcome back to my channel Practical Learning Assets. So in today's video, we will be covering Chapter 9 of Political Science, that is Constitution as a Living Document. In our last videos, we have covered Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 of Political Science, and in today's video, we will be covering Chapter 9. As we all know, Chapter 1, 2, 9 and 10. All of these 4 chapters, they comprise of one topic, that is Constitution. The topic Constitution has been divided into 4 chapters in our books, and first of all we will be covering all these 4 chapters to complete our topic Constitution. So let's start with the video. Are constitutions static? Now the word static here means that are the constitutions still? So let's see, are the constitutions static or not? It is not uncommon for nations to rewrite their constitutions in response to changed circumstances or change of ideas within the society or even due to political upheavals. The Soviet Union had 4 constitutions in its life of 74 years. During 1918, 1924, 1936, and 1977. In 1991, the rule of the Communist Party of Soviet Union came to an end, and soon the Soviet Federation disintegrated. After this political upheaval, the newly formed Russian Federation adopted a new constitution in 1993. Now here we have discussed that it is not uncommon for nations to rewrite their constitutions. That it is very common that the nations, they rewrite their constitutions in response to changed circumstances or a change in the ideas within the society. And the one example for this is the Soviet Union. It had 4 constitutions. Its constitution was written 4 times in its life of 74 years during 1918, 24, 36 and 77. And then in 1991, the rule of the Communist Party of Soviet Union, it came to an end, and after that the newly formed Russian Federation adopted a new constitution in 1993. This paragraph is very important from MCQ point of view, and we need to remember the years. Now let's talk about India. But look at India. The Constitution of India was adopted on 26 November 1949. Its implementation formally started from 26 January 1950. More than 69 years after that, the same constitution continues to function as the framework within which the government of our country operates. Now here we talked about Indian Constitution. Now some of the questions arise because of this thing. Is it that a constitution is so good that it needs no change? Or was it that our constitution makers were so far-sighted and wise that they had foreseen all the changes that would take place in the future? In some sense, both the answers are correct. It is true that we have inherited a very robust constitution. The basic framework of the constitution is very much suited to our country. It is also true that the constitution makers were very far-sighted and provided for many solutions for further situations. But no constitution can provide for all eventualities. No document can be such that it needs no change. Then how does the same constitution continue to serve the country? One of the answers to such questions is that our constitution accepts the necessity of modifications according to changing needs of the society. Secondly, in the actual working of the constitution, there has been enough flexibility of interpretations. Both political practice and judicial rulings have shown maturity and flexibility in implementing the constitution. Now, as we were asking the question that is our constitution so robust, or were the constitution makers so far-sighted, and how is it possible that the same constitution continues to serve the country? So for these questions we have 2 answers. The one is that our constitution accepts the necessity of modifications. We can make modifications in our constitution according to the changing needs of the society. Then second answer comes that in the actual working of the constitution, there has been enough flexibility of interpretations. Our constitution is not a frozen and an unalterable document. It is a document made by human beings and may need revisions, changes and re-examinations. It is true that the constitution reflects the dreams and aspirations of the concerned society. It must also be kept in mind that the constitution is a framework for the democratic governance of the society. In this sense, it is an instrument that societies create for themselves. The makers of the Indian Constitution placed the Constitution above ordinary laws and expected that the future generations will respect this document. At the same time, they recognized that in the future, this document may require modifications. The Constitution is a sacred document and it is an instrument that may require changes from time to time. In other words, a constitution is not a static document, it is not a still document, and it is not the final word about everything, and it is not unalterable. Now let's see how can we amend the constitution. Here we have been given one article, that is Article 368. It says that Parliament may in exercise of its constituent power amend by way of addition, variation or repeal any provision of this constitution in accordance with the procedure laid down in this article. Now we have already seen that the makers of our constitution wanted to strike a balance. They wanted our constitution to be flexible and at the same time rigid. Now flexibility here means open to changes and rigidity means resistant to changes. A constitution that can be very easily changed or modified is often called flexible. In the case of constitutions which are very difficult to amend, they are described as rigid. The Indian Constitution combines both these characteristics. Now, the makers of the Constitution were aware of the fact that there may be some faults or mistake in the Constitution, and whenever such mistakes would come to light, they wanted the Constitution to be easily amended. The Constitution was framing a federal polity and therefore the rights and powers of the states could not be changed without the consent of the states. Some other features were also so central to the spirit of the Constitution that the Constitution makers were anxious to protect these from change. Now these provisions had to be made rigid. Therefore, we can conclude that our Constitution is flexible and at the same time it is rigid. Now there are many articles in the Constitution which mention that these articles can be amended by a simple law of Parliament. No special procedure for amendment is required in such cases, and there is no difference at all between an amendment and an ordinary law. Now these parts of the Constitution are very flexible. Now here we are given two articles. Now in both these articles, the wording by law. Here we read by law. This indicates that these articles can be modified by the Parliament without recourse to the procedure laid down in Article 368, the article that we read at the starting of this topic, that is how to amend the Constitution. Now for amending the remaining parts of the Constitution, provisions has been made in the Article 368 of the Constitution. There are two methods of amending the Constitution and they apply to two different sets of articles of the Constitution that we read just now. And the first is that amendment can be made by special majority of two houses of the Parliament. But separately, there is no provision for joint sittings. Then the other method is more difficult. It requires special majority of the Parliament and consent of half of the state legislatures. Now, besides the special majority in the Parliament, no outside agency like a Constitution Commission or a separate body is required for amending the Constitution. Then, an amendment bill, like all other bills, goes to the President for his assent But in this case, the President has no powers to send it back for reconsideration. Now these details show that how rigid and complicated the amending process could have been. Our Constitution avoids these complications. This makes the amendment procedure relatively simple. But more importantly, the process underlines an important principle. Only elected representatives of the people are empowered to consider and take final decisions on the question of amendments. Thus, sovereignty of elected representatives is the basis of the amendment procedure. It is also known as parliamentary sovereignty. Now, as we read that special majority is needed to amend the Constitution. So, let's read what is special majority. Ordinarily, all businesses of the legislature requires that a motion or resolution or bill should get the support of a simple majority of the members voting at the time. Now first let's see what is simple majority. Suppose that at the time of voting on a bill, 247 members were present in the house and all of them participated in the voting on the bill. Then the bill would be passed if at least 120 members voted in favor of the bill. Amendment to the Constitution requires two different kinds of special majorities. In the first place, those voting in favor of the amendment bill should constitute at least half of the total strength of that house. Secondly, the supporters of the amendment bill must also constitute 2/3 of those who actually take part in voting. Now, first, that those who are voting in favor of the amendment bill, they should comprise at least half of the total strength of that house. Then, the supporters of the amendment bill, they must also constitute 2/3 of those who are actually voting for the bill. Now, both houses of the parliament must pass the amendment bill separately in this same manner. There is no provision for a joint session. For every amendment bill, this special majority is required. Now, if we talk about Lok Sabha, there are 545 members. Therefore, any amendment bill must be supported by a minimum of 273 members. Even if only 300 members are present at the time of voting, the amendment bill must get the support of 273 out of them. This means that unless there is sufficient consensus over the proposed amendment, it cannot be passed. If the party in power enjoys very thin majority, it can pass legislation of its choice and get budget approved, even if the opposition does not agree. But it would need to take at least some opposition parties into confidence if it wanted to amend the Constitution. So, the basic principle behind the amending procedure is that it should be based on broad support among the political parties and parliamentarians. Then comes ratification by states. Now, for some articles of the Constitution, special majority is not sufficient. When an amendment aims to modify an article related to distribution of powers between the states and the central government, or articles related to representation, it is necessary that the states must be consulted and that they give their consent. Now, we have studied about federalism. Federalism means powers of the state must not be at the mercy of the central government. The Constitution has ensured this by providing that legislatures of half of the state have to pass the amendment bill before the amendment comes into effect. This provision also respects the states and gives them participation in the process of amendment. At the same time, care is taken to keep this procedure somewhat flexible, even in its more rigid format. Consent of only half of the states is required. Now we may summarize that the Constitution of India can be amended through large-scale consensus and limited participation of the states. So guys, this was all for today's video. Let's summarize what we have discussed today. First, we discussed that what are static constitutions and is our Indian Constitution static. Then we discussed that how can we amend the Constitution. So we read three different types of procedures. So guys, if you like today's video, so don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel. Bye guys.